Whenever I watch a great movie, and I tend to watch very few movies and even fewer that I like, I often stay a little time of media in general, be it books, comics, music. And the reason for that is that a piece of art that makes an impact on me. Uh, when that happens, I find myself thinking non-stop about that goddamn thing that gets stuck into my head. It's not to say that my thoughts are especially profound, or nor do I say this in order to criticize people who binge or consume media ferociously. That critic may come in the future if I think it's valid. I haven't really put enough thought into it. But the point is, I just can't stop overthinking the film in question. That's actually the reason for this channel, an outlet for me to dump these thoughts while bringing cohesion to it, and hopefully finding like-minded silly people that enjoy the same things. Anyway, in the case of movies, there is a lot of aspects to it, the plot being the most immediate. So much so that when people ask, what's the movie about? They want you to tell them the plot. And fair enough, most movies rely on storytelling, and the plot is central to it. However, there's much more to movies than just the plot. And I know I'm not telling anyone here anything new, but besides the plot we have acting, cinematography, stage and costume design, soundtrack, editing, and the list goes on. And while dividing the movie into these categories can be fun and a very useful tool of analysis, there is another division that I find more useful to my point. The division of the movie into scenes. And I did just make it sound like the division I was proposing was way more elaborate than this, didn't I? But, oh well. The reason I like to think the movie into scenes is not only because segmentation like that makes it easier to organize and thus understand art, such as the acts on a play or the sections of a song, but also because a scene is normally what sticks with me. And maybe the same thing happens to you. Someone you know mentions the movie you like, or you'd see it in a tier list, like the ones I love watching, even though I think they're a little dumb. Or maybe you see it added into a streaming service you watch. And then what happens is that the first thing that comes to mind when you reminisce about that movie is a particular scene or scenes. The rest of the movie is kind of blurry. You do remember the core plot, maybe a bit of the soundtrack, but that scene, it's just clear as day. And if that happens to you, please comment below, because I'd be interested to know if more people feel the way, and comment the examples too. As you can see in the title, today I want to talk about Blade Runner, the science fiction classic beloved by everyone from cinema critics to edgy people on the internet that go, this is what technology, capitalism, Kanye West, or whatever want to put the blame on these days, does to society. This is our doom, this is our future. And I mean, not that they are wrong, but the edginess, the edgelordness. However, it's kind of an easy read that this movie capitalizes on one of humanity's greatest fears, the future. And also, it uses this idea that with the evolution of technology, humanity falls with each step of the cyber ladder, increasing its degeneracy and isolation in the process. These themes in of themselves are enough material for a lot of futuristic dystopian works, and we sure have had some more lighthearted, some even darker than Blade Runner. But what makes the Ridley Scott classic stand out is basically two things, which incidentally are the two things that tend to make a piece of art great. How it gets the general themes and relates them to ourselves as humans, and how it masterfully uses the resources of cinema, in this particular case, to convey and showcase these ideas. In regards to the first point, I must make a clarification. Every piece of media is always very diverse. To pinpoint one aspect of it as being its total, or to define the work by a certain idea, is to rob yourself from other aspects of it. Sure, you can define The Simpsons as a satire of American society in the 90s and end it there. but you would lose the very human moments of real heart that the show had, if you're talking about it, which can redefine the show as a satire of American society in the 90s and how people still come through and find a way to live amidst that glorious mess. It's not that a particular idea or event can't be the main catalyst for a piece of media. And dividing the media into these multiple ideas and using each one as a sole lens can be a very useful tool to understand and analyze said media. However, where it changes from the presentation of an argument or, in some cases, mere propaganda, is when the work is formed. It's when this change occurs that the work is formed, as it explores the multiple aspects of humanity related to what is being showcased in that particular piece of art. As for the use of cinematic resources, that all has to point back to what I've said about themes and ideas. It's like in a comic book. I can tell you the plot through romanticized text, making it more like a novel, if you will. And it can be great. I think I'd love Berserk if it were a novel, or a movie, or anything, because the story is just that good. However, the images are the plot. There is no separation. If you're reading Berserk, you're experiencing that story through those images. They are not something that can be separate. Sure, some comics are more text-driven, but the graphic part remains inseparable. Same goes for cinema. From lighting through acting, all aspects are the movie. And so, all of them must relate to what's thematic about the film. Sometimes, it will not be as direct and easy to connect, say, the cinematography of the movie to its ideas. But if you got that theme from the movie, then if you're thinking about a certain idea or anything that you saw, you gotta know that the cinematography is part of what brought it to you, even if you don't realize it. I could go on about the inspirations and themes of Blade Runner, for its design, for its plot, and all that, but I'll try to be direct here. Remember when I said that picking a sole theme can be useful to analyze a piece of media? Well, now is the time to do that. And it's a very whimsical theme that I want to talk about. What is it to be human? Light topic, innit? That question is something that we tend not to give much attention to. Alas, we are human, biologically at least. But is that it? Is being human just partaking in the Homo sapiens species? Well, it's a part of it, but certainly not all. The way we rationalize and feel, the forming of bonds, and the nature of our actions are all characteristics of what it is to be human. And sure, you can boil down everything in terms of physics, chemistry, and biology, and you'd have a perfect answer of what is a human. The only thing you would leave out of said answer is the things that really matter about humanity. This question is from the get-go presented in the movie, in the text shown at the beginning of it. And for the people who have not watched it yet, spoilers from now on. In the world of Blade Runner, a gigantic corporation called Tyrell created a kind of robot called a replicant, practically identical to a human in appearance and only being stronger, faster, and with a shorter 4 years lifespan. These replicants were to be used in colonization projects outside of Earth as slave labor, among other things. However, the replicants got advanced to a point where they mutinied, making them illegal on Earth as it would be dangerous to the inhabitants of the planet to be in contact with said robots. To combat eventual androids that came to Earth, a special police force, the Blade Runner units, were formed. And our movie centers around Deckers, one of these Blade Runners, who is tasked with stopping a group of rogue replicants that have come to Earth. From this prelude, some people can already guess where the "what is it to be human?" question will come from. Oh, is the replicant not human? Because it feels, it looks like a human, and it has dreams, thoughts, etc. And sure, that can create a "I already know where this is going" attitude among some, like I did. As if now there's no more reason to be interested, because you know what the question is and where it comes from. However, art is frequently not about what or where, but how. The way things are said and showcased will make all the difference, and you can infer certain things or subtly notice the theme being used. For example, when I was talking about the plot, I said, in the world of Blade Runner, a gigantic corporation called Tyrell created a kind of robot called a replicant, practically identical to a human in appearance. But that statement, which is incidentally how the movie says it as well, in and of itself already positions itself towards the question. If something is practically identical to other thing, it is because you can define it as not being that something. Not that I don't think replicants are human. To be quite honest, I haven't got a proper answer, nor do I think it's something so important to be answered. But the question is what I would rather focus on, such as with the hint which refers to the killing of a replicant, and that appears in the last lines of the opening text. This was not called an execution, it was called retirement. Which is such a cruel way to dehumanize the replicants, because were the humans of Blade Runner to call the ending of a replicant an execution, it would undoubtedly humanize them and make us sympathize more. So it's better to say you retire a replicant, like a lifeless machine. And this contrast, this paradox of calling a killing also a retirement, is what made me never forget the scene that inspired this video, since, after all, it's a scene centered on a retirement. Our protagonist is on the hunt for the replicants, and a couple of leads end up leading him to a strip club. There, he finds one of the replicants, a woman named Zora, who is hiding under the name Miss Salome. He initially tries to approach her unsuspiciously, pretending to be someone else and with small talk and that Han Solo charm. Kinda. But she notices something's up and tries to escape. The chase begins. Deckers has trouble identifying her amidst the crowds of people in the streets. He points his gun haphazardly towards the crowd, looking for an opening to shoot. The opportunity finally appears, and he takes the shot, or more precisely, shots. Zora is dead, or better, retired. From the moment the chase starts till when Deckers examines the body, less than 5 minutes have passed. Yet, such a short while made to feel even shorter due to the action, camera movement, and editing remains fixated in my memories. I guess the reason for it is that everything in this scene seems to point to the question of humanity, and it points with yet more questions. For you see, when the chase begins, Deckers is having trouble finding the replicant. It feels like trying to find Waldo. First, you try looking line by line, column by column, till eventually you just start looking from chunk to chunk, jumping all over the image. Okay, maybe that's just how I do it, but the cuts of the editing convey that agony perfectly. At least that's how I look at it. Anyway, what's interesting about this inability to find is that she's hiding amidst a crowd of people of a lot of different races and cultures, and yet, even so with that detail, he is still unable to see her in this crowd. It's less like finding a needle in a haystack and more like finding a synthetic haystack in the haystack. While among humans, this species to which the replicant should not belong to, it becomes difficult to tell apart who is who and who is what. And when finally Deckers finds her, he is still unable to get a clean shot, with humanity acting as her shield until she approaches a store. That's key. That store is full of mannequins. And in the middle of the lifeless models that are only made to resemble a human and follow a designated purpose, Decker sees the difference clearly and lands the shot, bringing down what is to him a lifeless model that was only made to resemble a human and to follow a designated purpose. Her body, or maybe some would call her carcass, lies on the ground, wrapped in plastic clothing, like a plastic wrapped product. It is also worth noticing that this is the first time in the movie that we see a replicant being retired. And when the shot hits her, blood appears, which is something that we would expect from a bullet hitting a human, but a robot? It should be something surprising. Like, if you shoot your vacuum cleaner and it bled, you would find it strange. But the movie shows it to us. And if you don't think about it, it is most likely that it won't surprise you. You won't think, oh, that robot is bleeding. No, it's just natural. Because that's how good a job this scene makes of making us feel that the woman is a woman, not a mere machine. Even though we know from the plot that she is a replicant. Yeah, the imagery alone should suffice to convey with brilliance the problems and questions brought up by the movie. But what puts the final nail in Zora's neon Coca-Cola sponsored coffin is the soundtrack. The whole soundtrack by Vangelis is a must listen. He manages to join futuristic sounding synthetic instruments with traditional colors of sound from non-Western cultures, all the while imbuing the tunes with a lyricism that can create a range from disturbing restlessness to adventurous impetus and melancholic beauty. I could go on and on about this soundtrack, and I really do recommend you listen to it after this video. But instead of taking my time and talking about the whole soundtrack, I want to focus on the track that starts playing just as Zora is getting shot, the fantastic Blade Runner Blues. It is such a great mirror of what's happening, since the tune starts with what I think are only synthetic strings. I'm not a specialist in synthesizers, so please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but this is a sound that resembles something organic, while not being it, with a trained human being able to notice the difference. The confusion is even greater since these synth strings go on and play harmonies, which to the untrained ear makes the notes sound blurry, difficult to pinpoint, unlike a melody. However, when the synthesizer, a very clear sound of synthesizer, which is a clearly inorganic instrument and sound, starts to play, it stands out at the center with a very well-defined melody. That melody is full of sadness, as if they are the resigned remarks of someone who knows their time is up. I hope I have been able to show you how every single element of this scene points to the same theme, and how it finds ways to convey through the media of cinema and the leveling of its resources set themes. Because that's, for me at least, what great cinema should do. It shouldn't restrict itself to having a good script and fine acting, but utilize all that is on its disposal to display its ideas for the audience, and display such ideas through all the elements of the media that it can. And this scene just does that beautifully. Guess that's why it's the scene that stuck with me.